Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and with the Snyder Cut being officially announced not too long ago, a couple weeks ago at the time of this upload, we are here to talk about the possibility of the Ayer Cut of Suicide Squad. Now, why I bring this up is because with Snyder getting his due, I think Ayer deserves his due. So we're here to talk about, is it possible, should it happen, and what to expect. Now, is it possible? Of course it's possible, because David Ayer has been very vocal on Twitter saying it would be cathartic for him to finish it because he's basically done with the whole movie, his version of it, except for a few VFX, unlike Snyder, which needs the 60 million plus or whatever he needs to finish his. So, of course, it is a very good possibility. And do I think it should happen? I absolutely do believe it should happen. Now, why is that? And this has nothing to do with whining and crying about wanting a different version because the initial release versions got a bad reception. This is about the studio correcting what they did wrong, which is basically screwing over these directors, both of them. And I believe both Snyder and Ayer deserve this, okay? Because I'll just quickly go over what happened to Snyder. With Snyder, he had a tragic family tragedy, and of course he had to step down. And that's when Joss Whedon came in and basically reshot majority of Justice League. And according to Snyder, I don't know how truthful this is, but according to Snyder, his parts of his movie were only in about a quarter of the actual Justice League movie that we saw. So, give or take, that's 20, 30 minutes. So that's not a lot. And given that his Justice League was supposed to be 3.5 hours, I think it's what it's supposed to be, 3.5, 4 hours, that's definitely not a lot of footage. So that's what happened for him, and that's when the huge campaign started for the release of the Snyder Cut. It took years, and it finally happened. Now, I think one of the things that people are failing to recognize is I think AT&T is a way bigger part of this than what everybody's giving them credit for, because ever since AT&T has gotten involved, they've become very vocal about fan support and stuff like that. And once they got involved, that's when the Snyder Cut became a thing, and now it's looking like a possibility that the Ayer Cut may become a thing, because they've even teased that too. Now, when we talk about Ayer, now, Suicide Squad, we can all say, is probably one of the biggest letdowns in comic book movie history, right? Now, for me, I will say it is a guilty pleasure movie. I know it has a lot of flaws, it's got a lot of problems, I get that, but to me, I still find it somewhat enjoyable, because I've been a fan of the Suicide Squad for most of my life, even before the movie. I just love the concept. And when it comes to David Ayer, all you need to do is look at the first Comic-Con trailer and then look at what we got. Okay, if you look at that first Comic-Con trailer, the tone of it and how everything looked, and then you watch what we got with the actual release, nothing alike. And now what happened, I guess I should say allegedly, is that obviously BVS got very poor reception, and one of the critiques of many was that it was too dark and gritty for some critics. I'm not saying majority of them said that, but for some of them, that's what it was. So that gave WB cold feet, and they were like, oh crap, because obviously we all knew that this movie was originally supposed to be dark, because, it's the Suicide Squad, but because of the BVS reception, and then David Ayer came out and said that also the reception of Deadpool made WB force him, essentially, to change Suicide Squad into a comedy. So that's why there was a bunch of reshoots, there was a bunch of changes, and that's why we got what we got. So like I said, when it all comes down to it, I think both directors deserve this. If Snyder got it, I think Ayer deserves it too. I especially think that since, according to Ayer, that he says it's going to be cathartic for him to finish it, because as I mentioned previously, he's pretty much done with the whole vision of his movie. It's just it needs a few VFX. It's I honestly don't care which one gets released first, but honestly, if his isn't going to take a lot of work, it's heck, release his first. Because in my eyes, when the Suicide Squad comes out, as in the James Gunn version, say that movie comes out and gets critically acclaimed. Of course, we don't know if that's going to happen, but let's just say if it does. Do you really think that AT&T, Warner Brothers, or whoever is going to be okay, yeah, let's release the Ayer Cut now? I highly doubt that, okay? If I'm David Ayer, or if I'm the part of the fan base that wants the Ayer Cut to come out, I'm going to want this to come out before the Suicide Squad comes out, because I have a feeling if the Suicide Squad gets praised, then the Ayer Cut's never going to happen. That's just my opinion, but I don't know. So, of course, do I think this should happen? Absolutely. Do I think it's going to happen in the near future? It could be a possibility. honestly, because who knows? They got this DC online fair or whatever you want to call it in August, and they could announce it there. Who knows? Maybe they won't, but it's a possibility. Now, throughout this video, we're going to be talking about like what to expect in this version, and most of it is based off things we know, but I assume some of them can just be assumptions, but for the most part, it's stuff that we already know is a huge possibility. So, of course, with that, let's go ahead and get into what to expect with the Ayer Cut of Suicide Squad. And now with the first thing to expect in the Ayer Cut of the Suicide Squad, or just Suicide Squad, don't want to get it confused with the James Gunn version, is, of course, I know a lot of people are going to dislike this because they didn't like his version, but yes, there will be more of Jared Leto's Joker. Now, in my opinion, I don't think he really got a fair chance. Okay, I honestly don't, because first of all, he only had like 7-8 minutes of screen time. His scenes had like little to no context, and the editing, of course, didn't help, which we'll get to that later. So I honestly do not think that Jared Leto got a fair chance. As we all know, I'm pretty sure we all know this, a lot of his footage got cut from the movie. Now, why is that? Nobody can say except for the director or the people who worked on the movie. But we can assume the possibilities are, of course, that it was deemed too dark or disturbing, because apparently there was a scene that David Ayer said that at the beginning with Monster T in the club, that he not threatens him, but he taunts him or whatever and makes him commit suicide. And obviously that's not what happened in the theatrical. They cut away when he apparently got shot. So that's one thing. I know another possibility that people would say is that, well, of course, his performance wasn't that great. Hey, who knows? That could be a possibility too. But we do know that there would be more of Jared Leto's Joker. As I mentioned previously, I don't think he got a fair chance, okay? Because, especially when it comes to his performance, because when you look at, for example, the scene where he says, "I'm going to hurt you really, really bad," when you look at that in the first Comic-Con trailer, I keep bringing that up because, of course, that's like the best part for this movie. When you watch that and then you look at how he did it in the actual movie when they reshot it, when he did it in the Comic-Con trailer, the way that he acted in that, the delivery and the acting was so much better there than what he did in the movie with the reshoot. So that's an instance where it does give me hope that there is a good performance in there. It's just that WB just decided to, screw things up, and Edward Scissorhands everything. So we also know that he was going to be a major factor, or more of a factor. Yeah, I wouldn't say major, but more of a factor in the story, because obviously in what we got, it's like he was a very minimal character. He would just show up every now and then. But apparently in the original version, he was supposed to show up at the end at the subway when they're about to fight Enchantress or whatever and have a standoff with them. And then he was supposed to team up with Enchantress at the end to make a dynamic duo, essentially. So we know that he has a bigger role. And honestly, I know a lot of people have issues with his Joker, but in all honesty, I just don't think he got a fair shot. I think he deserves to have more of his footage shown to give a true performance, because I don't think the 7 or 8 minutes that he gave us doesn't really warrant all the hate that he gets, in my opinion. I think he needs a solid, I'd say, at least 12 minutes or 14, 15 minutes minimum, okay? Because when you have such a small airtime or runtime like that, it's kind of hard to judge a character, because as I mentioned previously, it's like he had a short runtime, his scenes had little to no context, and the editing didn't help whatsoever. And of course, I mentioned the "I'm going to hurt you really, really bad." It's like you watch the Comic-Con trailer, the performance and the delivery was so much better there than it was in the actual movie. So like I said, that gives me hope. So if you're not a fan of Leto's Joker, of course there's a chance that, yes, the performance could still be bad in your eyes and you'll have to deal with that, but there's still other things to look forward to. Now, this is another obvious one that would probably be true, and that is, of course, that it would be darker. And now I love how I say that it's going to be darker, yet I still have the colorful background, but I'm just going with like all the marketing that they had going for the movie. But of course, it would most likely be darker because, as I mentioned previously, the original version, I believe, was supposed to be a darker movie, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it was going to be rated R. But because of the BVS reception and Deadpool's success and Guardians of the Galaxy's success, WB got cold feet, and also there's a a major figure that's known for Green Lantern comics, and his last name starts with a J, who shall remain unnamed. That seems to be a major factor into screwing these movies. So obviously they changed the tone of this movie. I know initially, I believe that they said that when they were doing the reshoots, that it's like, oh no, it's just normal procedure, blah, 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 blah. This has nothing to do with the tone or changing it and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, that's a load of BS. We all know that that was lies. And of course, we know that all those reshoots were to lighten the mood and make it more like a comedy. Because I guarantee you the original version, because it's like, come on, if you know David Ayer movies, for the most part, I know you could say Bright, you could bring that up. It's like, okay, whatever. But if you look at all the other movies he's done, he's not really known for lighthearted movies or comedic movies. So I bet that the original version is a lot darker. There's probably way crazier moments, like I said, when Joker forces Monster T, the guy who Common plays, to commit suicide. And then there's probably other dark stuff in there too, but I can't recall because, once again, you look at the first... I'm sorry I keep bringing this up and I sound like a broken record, but if you look at the first Comic-Con trailer, that was what we were supposed to get originally, right? And then you look at the later trailers, you could tell where they ended up going. Now, when I say darker, do I necessarily think that means it's more violent by any means? I don't think so, okay? I don't think there's any more blood or gore or anything like that, but I do think there'd be like more disturbing imagery and stuff like that, especially when it comes to Enchantress, where they had like the satanic stuff. So we also know that to be true, and it's like maybe some of the characters' backstories would get more fleshed out to where they'd have a darker backstory and stuff like that. So that's another thing to expect in the Ayer cut of Suicide Squad. And as I mentioned previously, I would not be surprised if it were to get an R rating. Not guaranteeing that, but I could see it as a possibility, kind of like how the BVS Ultimate Edition got an R rating, even though I really don't understand why, because it really wasn't that much different, just a little bit of blood. Other than that, I don't know. But definitely expect it to be darker, because if you know David Ayer movies, like I said, except maybe the exception of Bright, pretty much all of his movies are dark. So you only need to watch, End of Watch, Fury, and Training Day, although he's the writer on that. I feel like a lot of people get confused and think he's the director on that movie. He's a writer, but still he's involved with that movie. It's not meant as an insult. You just watch those movies. It's like he's known for making dark movies. Now, this is where it gets a little interesting, okay? Now, I know on the screen it says different plot, but I suppose I should imply that, or I should emphasize that it's a slightly different plot, okay? Now, when I say it's a different plot, this is what I mean, is that obviously Enchantress is still essentially the big bad. We all know that it's still going to be a thing, right? But her motives were going to be different, and instead of those blobs that we got, she was going to summon parademons, which would then connect to Justice League, okay? Now, because I believe that was another part of the reshoots, is that we got those blobs with the eyes all over them and stuff like that, instead of the parademons, which we were supposed to get, because allegedly the original version is that Enchantress gets taken over by a mother box or whatever, or the mother box is controlling her, whatever, and basically forces her, because she's got like OP powers and all this stuff, to open a boom tube, which of course becomes kind of prominent in Justice League, to summon the parademons to Earth, and is supposed to introduce Steppenwolf and the parademons, which would then connect to Justice League. I believe that this was supposed to be the original intent of this movie, was supposed to better connect to Justice League, but as mentioned previously, they changed a lot of things. And now I'll bring back Joker here for a little bit, because we also know that the Joker had a way bigger part in the story, not only with Joker and Harley scenes, because there's going to be more moments of that, because there was also supposed to be an abusive relationship, which of course we all know from especially the animated series and some of the comics, and of course that got scrapped, but we can assume that they would bring that back in for this version. And then also he was supposed to come in towards the end, fight the squad in the subway, and then try to team up with Enchantress. And at one point, the other thing is the helicopter scene where it looks like Harley just jumps out on her own or whatever. Originally, Joker was just supposed to push her out. And, it's that love-hate relationship, which, that's why she has that gun that says love-hate and all that stuff. And because he gets pissed off that she would rather go back to the squad instead of teaming up with Joker and then being the king and queen of Gotham, while Enchantress becomes basically queen of the world, right? So the plot would definitely be different. It would, now, like I say that, when I say that, I don't mean a major difference, but there would definitely be some changes. It would definitely be noticeable. Now, am I here to say it would make the movie better? No. But there's a possibility that it could, because of course none of us can say whether it makes it better or worse until we see it. To me, I think it would make it better, because I feel like it would make the plot a little more cohesive, and it would make more sense and all that stuff. And plus, when you have the DC Extended Universe, one of the complaints about it is that it never really feels connected, right? So, but if that would have been the plot, then that would have completely connected into Justice League, and it also makes references to BVS. So it's like, with this movie, they were trying to make those connections, but as mentioned previously, then they made all these reshoots, which then essentially scrapped a lot of things and changed a lot, and then tried to make it more like Guardians of the Galaxy and just a popcorn flick. So you can definitely bet that in the Ayer Cut, there is a slightly different plot, and I honestly do think it would be better than what we got, because I have a feeling that in that version we wouldn't get the the hula hoop Enchantress, right? Because that's one of the things everybody makes fun of. I have a feeling that wouldn't be there. I also feel like the blobs wouldn't be there either. It would be the parademons instead. I guess maybe the blobs would still be there, but then there would also be the parademons. So I have a feeling there's probably a different ending fight or finale as well, but I could be wrong. And there's probably different character arcs and different backstories and side plots and stuff like that. And we know that there's probably more Joker stuff fleshed out with what he did to like Griggs, for example, and all kinds of things like that. So that's definitely one of the major things that I would look forward to if the Ayer Cut were to happen. And now this would definitely be one of the major things that would improve the movie, which is better character development. Because I know, as I mentioned previously, Suicide Squad does have a lot of flaws, but one of the biggest ones was that it lacked character development, right? For the most part, I mean, I feel like the only characters that got good character development were probably Deadshot, Harley, and then maybe Amanda Waller. And that was probably about it. But I have a feeling with the Ayer Cut of Suicide Squad, because David Ayer is huge on character development, and you'd have to believe that in his original version, all these characters would have got fleshed out more instead of basically just getting thrown in there and getting very little backstory and all that stuff besides, like I said, Deadshot and Harley, essentially. Because, of course, Boomerang probably had more scenes. We even know Slipknot originally had a scene where he got captured and would give a little backstory on him instead of him just showing up from an SUV and getting thrown in, and it's like, oh, the man who can climb everything or anything, right? Pretty much nothing. He just gets thrown in there, and then when the mission starts, spoiler alert, I mean, if you haven't seen the movie or if you don't want to see the movie, then obviously when the mission starts, Boomerang tricks him into escaping, and then kaboom, because the neck bombs. So he was originally supposed to have a backstory in the movie, but of course that got scrapped. And I think this is a rumor, this isn't confirmed, but apparently his backstory was going to have to deal with him being a rapist, I believe, and basically make you like really hate him for what he's done, because I mean, you're supposed to do that with like all these characters essentially, but like he was supposed to be one of the worst out of all of them. So then when he got killed, you would at least feel, or you'd at least get a reaction from it, instead of just what we got where it's like he just gets thrown in there, gets killed, and it's like, oh, okay, I guess he's dead, right? And that was the problem with not a lot of character development. If you would have had character development, as I mentioned, when he died, then you might have had a proper reaction to it, compared to what we got, which is like, oh, okay, he's dead. Time to move on. So I have a feeling Deadshot would have got more fleshed out, and then, of course, Joker would, Harley would, a lot of the characters would, even Waller, Rick Flag, and all of them. So that would be another major plus for the Ayer Cut of Suicide Squad, is that it would have a lot more character development, so then you could get more interested in these characters. On to the last point, and this is obviously the biggest one of all, because Suicide Squad, of course, has a lot of complaints, a lot of flaws, but I think we can all agree that the biggest one is either the editing or, to some people, Leto's Joker, okay? But I think overall, I think the biggest problem, what most people can agree with, is the editing. Because what we got was essentially a music video. And that was the major complaint with the movie, is that it felt like a music video, because I don't get why they thought it was a smart idea to have the company that edited the trailers edit the movie. It's like, okay, yeah, they're great at editing trailers. We'll give them that. But that doesn't mean that they should edit a movie. Okay? And that was what happened, is that it basically felt like one big trailer. Because it's like, okay, yeah, those trailers were great, but the movie shouldn't be like that. It needs to feel smooth and edited crisp and stuff like that. But instead, it felt choppy, and there was popular music all over the place. They basically had zero of the scores in the movie. I mean, they only featured maybe 2 or 3 of the scores that were supposed to be in the movie. And I guess that's something I could mention briefly too, is I really hope that in the Ayer Cut that they feature more of the scores. Because I think one of the better moments in the movie is at the end when Deadshot's about to shoot the C4 to essentially, destroy the machine or whatever. And then that score kicks in. Because if I remember right, I believe the guy who did the score, I'm blanking on his name, but he was the guy who also scored... I think it was Gravity, right? Yeah, I believe it was Gravity. And of course, those were great scores. And then that score that kicked in when he's about to shoot that C4, it's like that totally elevated that scene. Because to me, I feel like if they were to add more scores and get rid of the popular songs, that could totally elevate this movie. Because, like I said, just that score alone elevated that scene. That was easily one of the better moments in the movie because I loved the way it was shot, and then the music was kicking in, and it just... everything was great about it. So I really hope that they were to get rid of all the, well, not all, but most of the popular songs and add more scores. But back to the editing, is that David Ayer even said that his movie got the Edward Scissorhands treatment. I'm not even joking to you when I say that. He legit said that, and we all know that it happened. Because they had the company that did the trailers do the movie. So, of course, that's why we got what we got. So... it sounds like if the Ayer Cut does happen, it's either just going to be Ayer himself editing it, which of course is a possibility, or maybe he'll hire one of his friends or something to do it. But regardless, if the Ayer Cut does happen, we can all expect that the editing would be a lot better. And I mean a lot better. It wouldn't be the music video, the choppiness. It would actually be cohesive. Everything would look a lot better. Everything would fit a lot better. And it's just the story would feel more complete instead of it being chop here, chop there, chop here and there, blah, 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 blah. So this would be the biggest thing to look forward to, in my opinion, because it's easily one of the, if not the biggest complaint about the movie is the editing. So there would definitely be better editing, which obviously that would greatly improve the movie in a big way. And I truly do hope that we get to see it someday. And I really believe that it would be better than what we got. All right, so that is all my points on what to expect from the Ayer Cut of Suicide Squad. Now, I should also mention, I can't believe I forgot this part, but when I was talking about it being a different plot, or a slightly different plot, is that there was also supposed to be a love triangle between Deadshot, Harley, and Joker, kind of like there was in the Assault on Arkham animated movie, which apparently David Ayer is a fan of, and he must have taken inspiration from. Okay, I got that out of the way. So, of course... what is your opinion on it? What do you think of all my points? And would you want to see it? Do you think it will happen? And in conclusion, as I mentioned, I hope that it does happen because I think both Snyder and Ayer deserve this. Since Snyder's getting his due, I believe Ayer deserves his too. Now, as I mentioned, I could care less whether these versions are better or worse. I just think both directors deserve to show us what they wanted to show us, okay? Because both of them got screwed over by the studio, which obviously most of those people, if not all of them, are gone now. And as I mentioned, the biggest factor was a guy that's known for Green Lantern comics, and the last name starts with J. He's basically the biggest snake that apparently was the one screwing with these movies. So, in conclusion, would you want to see the Ayer Cut of Suicide Squad? Do you think it should happen, or do you think it shouldn't happen and just leave it as it is and move forward? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, as always, I'd love to see you all next time.
For